So, in our previous video, we looked at the very basic chemistry involved, and on this video, we will start to apply it a little more, as it relates to biology. In this chapter, we will be looking at biochemistry. So, what is it? Well, biochemistry is study of chemistry, all the things like composition of matter, reactions, and so on, as it relates to life. Remember, biology was all about study of life. So biochemistry brings these two together. And no, we are not trying to make you a biochemist during this short video, but simply review some of the basic concepts that you will have been exposed already earlier on your courses. So, all chemicals can be classified either as inorganic or as organic. And both are equally important for life. If you have taken a class with me, I will have told you about how conservation restoration of organic versus inorganic materials differs. The big thing to note here is that our focus will be largely on organic materials, but there are also important inorganic compounds that we need to know. And of course, the big difference between the two is that while organic molecules contain carbon, inorganic ones do not. And the first point that I wanted to discuss with you is the importance of water for all life. And there are 7 important properties of water that again you should have covered in your previous courses. But most living things that are made of cells contain around 70% of water. And this is true also for us humans. The amount varies a little bit, but it's really quite remarkably large, isn't it? Next, salts. Earlier we discussed about ionic bonds usually resulting in salts. And of course salts can dissolve in water. And how this is especially important for us humans is that of course these ions are electrolytes. And electrolyte balance is something that we need to pay attention to. Drinking pure water in too high concentrations can actually be dangerous. So we often see professional athletes especially favoring these recovery drinks. On these, the amount of electrolytes are balanced and optimal for recovery. And finally, you should have talked about acids and bases in your previous introductory biology courses. This also included the discussion of pH scale. And how this is especially relevant to us humans is that the fact that living cells are very sensitive to the changes in pH of their environment. And this was where homeostasis helped us to maintain the body pH within a very narrow range that is ideal for life. And one of the methods to do this was the buffers. Okay, let's move on to focus on organic compounds a little bit. And these are unique to living systems. So in my field as a conservator restorer by large, we could say that organic objects have material that is of a living origin. And we will simply remind ourselves of the carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. You should have again covered these in more detail in your earlier studies. So let's have a quick look of these. And well, we remember that this is actually the order that gives the ease of access to these as a source of energy. Your body prefers to use carbs for energy, but if these are not available or accessible, we go for fats, and then we, as the last resource, the proteins. So carbohydrates include sugars and starches, and typically they are classified based on their size. Monosaccharides contain one sugar chain or ring-like structure. A good example would be, for example, a single glucose molecule. And then, when we have two sugar units, we talk about disaccharides. Here, two monosaccharides are joined by a dehydration synthesis reaction where the water molecule is produced as a byproduct. Sucrose, lactose, and maltose would be good examples of important disaccharides. And then we have a group of polysaccharides, where we have many simple sugars linked together by the same dehydration synthesis process. I can think of only two polysaccharides of a significant importance for our body in this context, starch and glycogen. And starch is, of course, how plants store energy, while glycogen is applicable for animals. So really, carbohydrates' main function for us is to provide easily accessible source of energy for cells. And they are used to synthesize ATP, which is the energy currency of most cellular activities. Next, lipids. These are insoluble in water, readily dissolved in other lipids, as well as organic solvents such as alcohols. Triglycerides are going to be the first one that are of a particular interest here. These are made when three fatty acid chains are bound to one glycerol in a dehydration synthesis reaction. And often we talk about these as fats when they are solid and as oils when they are liquid. Typically, triglycerides are found beneath the skin, serving as an insulation to deeper body tissues, protecting, for example, from the heat loss and mechanical trauma. And then we could talk about saturated and unsaturated fatty chains, but this should be, again, something that you are familiar with. The other one that I think is quite important in terms of lipids is phospholipids. These contain phosphate, glycerol, and now there is two fatty acid chains. And the reason why phospholipids are so important for biology is that they are main building material of cell membranes. I am simply going to mention steroids here, but you can study them in more detail from your textbook if you have forgotten those. Now, next we will talk about proteins. These make up about 10 to 30% of the cell mass and are the basic structural material of the body. And although we often think about protein as the structural material that muscles and so on of our body are built from, not all proteins are just construction materials. They can play a role in cell functions such as enzymes, hemoglobin, contractility of muscles, and so on. Proteins are polymers of amino acids. And there are 20 common types of amino acids, which I am sure you have covered already earlier. But all amino acids share certain characteristics. The amine group shown on green and acid group shown on yellow. And the only difference between amino acids is what comes to the side group, often abbreviated as R, and shown in red on our diagram. So proteins are long chains of these amino acids, joined together by dehydration synthesis reaction. And we also remember that proteins could be studied on various structural levels. These were the folding models that you can see sometimes. Finally, let's have a look at the nucleic acids. These are, of course, our DNA and RNA. The structural units of nucleic acids are known as nucleotides. And I am going to assume that you know or will review the structure of these from your previous studies. So that completes our review of organic compounds and also this chapter. So this is all of the basic chemistry that I expect you to have an understanding of as we move to our A&P studies.